Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here at Plugged Into History. This is Thursday, which means it's Hands-on History Thursday, and we are here at the greenhouses. This is a part of Middleton Place that most people don't really get to see, and we are here again with Sidney Frazier, our Vice President of Horticulture. Good morning, Sid.
Good morning.
And we just wanted to show you a little bit of the view here. We've got some plants in the nursery here being cultivated, and because the weather is a little bit rainy, we're going to go inside the greenhouse today for Sydney's lesson. So without further ado, here's Hands-on History. Take it away, Sidney.
Hello everyone, it's good to be with you today. Today I'm going to show you how to properly plant a tree or a shrub. As Karen mentioned, we're not in the gardens today, so we're going to do this inside the greenhouse. So come on in and let me get started and show you what we're going to be doing today. So today is going to be a fun day, and I know it's raining, so it's probably a good time to actually get ready to put some plants in the ground because you have the moisture there, the rain is coming down, so it's a good day to do that. So I have my cheat sheet here with me today because I want to make sure I don't leave anything out today.
I'm sure it comes totally naturally to you, right? You just know the steps and just, yeah, so that's good.
It does, but I just kind of want to make sure there's some important points that I want to make sure I touch on today.
Sure.
So, to properly plant a shrub or a tree, they're both woody ornamentals, so the practices are the same for both, okay? So, the first thing we need to do is that we need to do something that homeowners do not like to do, and that is we need to have a soil test. We need to have the soil test in our yard to make sure that the pH is right in order to support the plant. So if you have a pH that is an 8, but you want to put a plant in the ground that require a 6.5 or something like that, the plant is not going to be happy. So this is something we do not like to do. So yes, do that, okay? Yes, go ahead and have that soil pH check so we can know exactly what we are going to do. Some of the soil pH reading, when you get them back, they're a little bit difficult to understand, but I will say this, there's a place called Possum Garden Center, and they will do it for you, and they will outline the whole process. They will tell you when to do it, how to do it, and the amount of addition you need to put into your soil to change that pH.
Is that local here, Sidney, you mean?
That is local. Possum is in North Charleston, Mount Pleasant, and West Ashley.
Great.
So you can go to any one of those sites and they will be able to do that for you.
And if they're not in the local area, is there probably a similar company in, other areas of the country that'll do the same thing?
Sure, most of your major garden centers would do that, but you can also go to your Clemson Extension Agency and they would do it as well. But what I really love about Possum is that they outline the whole process for you. So that's the good thing about it. So if you're a first-time gardener, then I kind of want to push you in that direction because they're going to really help you out.
Great.
So we got that out of the way. We have already got the soil pH. We know what it is. If we have to do any addition, we want to do that before planting because the reason why it takes time for that soil to make that adjustment. It doesn't happen overnight. So it can be years. So think about that. You want to do that beforehand. So how do we properly put a plant in the ground? So we have already figured out the soil pH. The next step is this. We want to know how the sun moves around in our yard. So we need to know how that sun is interacting with our yard in the winter, spring, summer, and fall, because that's going to determine what type of plant you're going to put in your yard. Is it going to be a shade-tolerant plant, a sun-loving plant, or a plant that can be diverse and grow in either shade or sun? So keep that in mind, okay? Because I know as a gardener, we like to put a lot of things in the ground, and then once the plant begins to react to what's happening there and we're not happy, then we start trying to figure out what's wrong. A little bit of preparation in the beginning can save a lot of work in the end and a lot of heartaches too. For me, I think about trees and shrubs as an investment in my yard. That's an investment. It's not like an annual. Annual, you're going to put it in, you're going to take it out. But when you start spending money for trees and shrubs, that's an investment. That's a long-term investment. So you want to think about that. So when you look at the plant, you need to look at the label of the plant, and it will tell you the condition that that plant will grow in. A lot of people will take something that needs a lot of space because it's pretty when it's blooming and put it right up against the door, And in 5 to 10 years, you have to hack the thing down. So we don't want to do that, okay? You just don't want to do that. So I'm going to use one of the Middleton oak seedling today to show you how to do this. And we have these seedlings here at the garden market and nursery for sale if you would like to purchase one of the Middleton oak seedling and plant them in your yard. But keep in mind, if you have been to Middleton Place and you've seen how large the Middleton oak is, think about how large this plant is going to be one of these days.
Don't plant it next to your door.
Do not plant it next to your door. That is very, very, very important. So, site location. I know I want a plant that requires shade, so I need to make sure that I have shade in my yard. If I do not have shade in my yard, maybe it's not a good thing to plant a plant that needs shade, but to plant a plant that will give shade, and then in the future I can come back and then put that plant in that requires shade. That's very important.
That's a great idea.
So, from my experience, when I get a phone call and someone said, my plant is dying, I just put it in the ground, it's been looking lovely for about 3 weeks, and now all of a sudden it looks like it's dying. 99% of the time it's because the plant was planted too deeply. That's what normally happens. Too deeply. So that's very important. When you look at the trunk of this plant, this is so crucial. And you look down into the container and you see where the soil meets the trunk. When you take this plant out of the ground and out of the pot and you put it in the ground, you want that same thing to happen. Okay? You do not want to plant it too deeply. It doesn't matter how well you mix up your soil and put all the great ingredients in it and all that good stuff, and then turn around and put the plant in the ground too deeply. Okay? Too deeply. So very important. So I just want to take this plant out of the pot. I'm going to turn the pot upside down. And here we're looking at, we see the system. This is, right now these roots are growing in a circle because that's the size of the pot and they don't have anywhere else to go. So what they would do, they would just keep growing around in that container. This is not bad at all. This is wonderful. Look how nice and white these roots are. That's a good sign that this plant is healthy. The soil mixture is exactly what the plant needs. But sometimes what you can do is just loosen this up a little bit. Just pull some of these roots away from the soil. And the reason why I do that, because when I put this plant in the ground, the hole that I am going to put it in is going to be twice as large as this root ball. So I want these roots to start growing out into the new soil that they are going to be placed in, because if you don't do that, this plant will continue to grow the root system in the same fashion. Now, this is very important. When you dig a hole, the hole must be larger than the root ball, because if you dig a hole the same size as the root ball, put this plant in there, these roots will definitely continue to grow in a circle until they force their way out into the new soil, which is going to be really hard because you didn't make the hole twice as large. So we already figured this out. And what I tell some people, if you're not really good about this, you can take a ribbon or something and tie it around the trunk of the tree. And when you put this plant in the ground, if you can't see that ribbon, that means that you have too much soil around the trunk of the tree. Okay, so that's a very good, easy practice. So I want to take this, I already got it set, it's ready to go. So I'm gonna have this imaginary hole that I dug out in the garden. It's raining out there today, so think about this. This is your soil out in the garden, and this is the hole that we dug. Okay, and we backfill it with some really nice compost because your plant need a well-drained soil for the most part. So we have done that, and so now we're going to take this plant and we're going to put it in the hole. Now, think about what I said, because this is very important. This is your virgin soil out here that is not disturbed, and this is your hole that you dug. And I always just use a piece of branch or stick or whatever and put it on top of your root ball, and you can see that's about 1 inch higher than the outer soil. That's what you want, 1 inch to 2 inch higher than this soil out here, because what's going to happen is that when you begin to water this plant and you begin to get rainfall, it's going to sink in the ground a little bit. So when that happens, it's going to be just right. But if you put it down, let's say we do this. This is a practice that most people do, and this is what I'm trying to get you to stop doing, is that Most people put the plant down in the hole like that, and now look what happens. So the plant is about 2 inches too deep in the soil. So what's going to happen is that you're going to put that soil all the way up around the trunk of the plant like that, because you are trying to get it up this level. This is what you are doing. So when you do this, what happened, and this is crucial, and a lot of people don't realize this, and landscapers do this all of the time, and I'll tell you why they do this after a while. It's not a good story. But what happened is that now that you have the soil up around the trunk of the tree starts to think survival. So what it does, it starts sending out new roots out of the trunk into this soil that is not supposed to be here. So by sending roots into this soil, it began to disregard the main roots in the root ball. So these new roots, they are not sufficient to support all of this growth up here. So your tree began to struggle, and what happened is it's a slow death. The tree will die. So you do not want the soil around there. And secondly, if you're going to mulch around your tree or your shrub, same practice. You do not want the mulch to be 4 inches up on the stalk of the plant or the trunk of the plant. You do not want that, because the mulch will do the same thing as the soil. We mulch to hold moisture, right? So that is what's happening. The mulch will hold the moisture there, and the tree will also think survival. You know, it's just like someone, if you put their head under water, they want to get their head above water. Well, the plant is thinking, I got to get my roots where it's supposed to be. So the same thing happened. It will begin to put roots out in that medium. So you do not want to do that. So mulching and planting too deep is very stressful to the plant. And I tell you, if you do have a landscaper that do that, just tell him he's fired. You're not going to keep him any longer. And make sure you don't pay him, because you're not supposed to do that. Landscapers know better, but it is an investment to their future income. So let's keep that in mind. So we want that plant to be properly planted. Okay? So we want it there. It's about 1.5 to 2 inches above your virgin soil out there. So when you water it, it's going to go down in the soil a little bit, because that soil is going to start to compact. And when that starts happening, then you should wind up exactly where you need to be. So now when you mulch it, you want to bring the mulch just a little bit above the root ball. Just a little. You don't need to have 4 inches of mulch up on the trunk of the plant. That's unnecessary. And not only that, but it's a place for pests to congregate. So you do not want to do that. Take it down, mulch it, just very lightly. Just lightly mulch it there. And then mulch it out here so that they can hold that moisture. Now keep in mind also, if you have a plant that you're putting in the shade, it may require less water than a plant that you're putting out in the full sun. So that's something you're gonna have to monitor when you do that. And sometimes you can also mix a slow release fertilizer into the soil medium. Mix that in very well. Make sure you blend it really good, because I've seen it where people have had it more on one side of the tree, and the tree actually respond to that. So one side of the tree is green, the other side is not green.
Wow.
So make sure that you really mix that fertilizer in there really well. Blend that really well. Take the time to do that, and then you can go ahead and put your plant in the ground. That's very important. Now, once you have planted it, think about watering, because that plant is going to need to be taken care of. You're going to have to water it when it needs to be watered. And for some trees or shrub, that may be a year to 2 years of watering, starting out heavy, and as the time going, you're cutting back on the water. So you have to wean the plant off watering. That's the process you have to do. The last thing you want to do, you do not want your plant to ever begin to stress from not receiving enough water. That's the worst thing that can ever happen. So if you buy a plant in a container, you can plant it any time of the year. But if you buy a plant that is B&B or wrap and burlap, it have been dug, you want to plant that during the fall and the winter and the very early spring, because with a B&B, those roots have been all cut. All of the roots have been cut, and now the plant doesn't have as much root as it used to have out in the field to support all of this green up here. So that's a process that you really need to think about as well. So,
do you have one or two signs of stress that people can look out for in their
sure,
plants?
yeah, absolutely. One of the first signs you're going to see will be on the leaves. The first sign you're going to see, leaves will begin to fade, look a little bit yellowish, and then begin to curl because the moisture is not there, and the plant is trying to pull it out of the root system. Keep in mind, the majority of your moisture will be coming from the root system, not the foliage, because a lot of people think it's coming from the foliage, but think about it. When the foliage receives rainfall, yes, but when it doesn't, where does that moisture come from? It's coming from the root system. So the root system is really serious to the survival of your plant, and that's why I can't stress enough to make sure that you do not plant too deeply. That is just so crucial not to do that with any shrubs or tree. That's just very important. You just don't want to do that. So moisture, you need that moisture to come. And if the plant still doesn't get moisture, then you begin to see the plant begin to look faded. That lush green that the plant had when you purchased it, it's not there any longer. So the plant began to die. But I also need to stress this, you can overwater. For those of you who do not have enough to do, you actually
Which
can
is possible in these quarantine days. Don't overwater your plants while you're at home, folks.
Don't do that. So you can overwater, so don't do that, because a lot of time overwatering will give you that same sign as well with the plants. So you got to be careful with that.
Okay.
All plants, for the most part, and you can't see it, but on the underside of the leaves, there are things called stolon, and they're a little tiny opening, and when the plant has too much water, they will open up and spit the water out. It's amazing. Some people say, well, the tree is crying when you walk under a tree and you feel water coming down. What's happening is that the root system have too much water, and the plant is saying, I have to get that water out, and that comes out through the foliage. So we have to put this under a microscope to actually see those little openings. But they open and they close. They open and they close. They open and they close. Too much water, they open up and they will just spit that water out of the tree. So the plant have so many unique ways of surviving. And but if we do a little bit of homework in the beginning, then I think in the end the plant will really reward you. So just keep that in mind. So soil test, got to do that. You need to know what your soil chemistry is. That's very important. Selection of plant based on what your yard can support. If your yard cannot support shade tolerant plant, then you may not want to put them out there, because what's going to happen, you're going to water, and the plant is never going to really look good. So keep that in mind. And also, once you get that soil pH test, go ahead and start applying what needs to be done, because if you do it early on, the plant will reward you in the end, and that's what we're really after, to allow that plant to grow very well. Make sure that you give enough space. Know the plant. If the plant needs, say, 4 feet of space, make sure the plant have that, because if you don't, you're going to be cutting the plant back constantly, so you don't want to do that. And also make sure that if you can't irrigate, then put in an irrigation system where the plant can receive irrigation, because of your work schedule, maybe you just can't do that. So basically, it's pretty easy. It's just that you need to follow those directions, and you should be successful in doing it.
That's great. Thank you. Folks, make sure that you drop any questions for Sidney in the comments here. We'd love to hear from you. And we have one comment about, I'm guilty of overwatering. I didn't realize how damaging that could be. So there you go. Thanks, Heather. You learned something today. And I just want to point out that Arthur's here in the hydrangeas. So there we go. Flat Arthur is hanging out with us today in the greenhouse. So if you have any questions, definitely let us know. Now is a great time to ask the expert while he's here with us. Even if you think of a question later on, you can still put it in the comments, and I'll make sure to get them all to Sidney and get you answers for your most pressing questions. But it sounds like soil testing is something that definitely needs to happen, and if you aren't in our local area, there's still places out there that you can go to get your pH tests and make sure. Oh, that's a great question. Thanks, McNeese. Do you have to test different areas of your yard?
That's a good thing to do, yes, because your yard soil can vary from section to section, And especially if you're moving in a new neighborhood, because most of the soil in a new neighborhood was brought in. So they could have been brought in from different landfill, so you don't know what's happening there. So I would say it's good to test the front yard and the backyard to make sure that that pH is something that you understand and you can make that adjustment. Yeah, I would say definitely do that, yes.
Great question, thank you. I'm gonna see if I can not flip my camera and check the time here. All right, we're still good. So.
Still good. Well, I should mention this as well. If you have a plant that you put in the ground and the plant is not stable, it's kind of moving around a little bit wobbly, you can always take something and stake it up. And the best way to do is to put two of these in, one on this side and one on that side, and use a string or something to tie it where when the wind is blowing, this would not move around too much, because what happened is that it began to loosen the root ball, the roots in here. So you need to stationary that plant by using two stakes or whatever you have. This is just bamboo, and then just tie it off so that the plant would not move, and that will be helpful as well, because that plant really need to be stationary, because as those new roots begin to grow out, they are really easy to snap off, to break off. So with a lot of movement, if you keep snapping those roots off, the plant will begin to struggle because it's not getting the root out into the soil. And as the plant grow here, it needs that root support. So keep that in mind as well. People don't think about it, but plants have what we would call in our human body veins, and they have xylem and phloem, and these veins will transport nutrient up into the stalk of the plant and in the foliage, and also they reverse the process and they bring nutrient down from the foliage into the root system. And this system is constantly at work. Just like the blood vein in our body, the blood is constantly moving through it. It's the same thing with the plant. We don't tend to think about that, but these plants have the xylem and phloem vessels that are constantly pushing this nutrient in, up and down, in through the cambia growth. So that's very important. We think a plant is just a plant, but it's a living organism.
Living organism,
and
absolutely.
it requires air and water, basically, like we do, and of course food, nutrient to survive as well. This plant would do perfectly well out in nature without any help from mankind, none whatsoever.
Sure. We do have a couple more questions. Can you recommend a hydrangea that would do better more in sun than in shade?
Oh my God, I tell you, I am not really the hydrangea expert. I just started working with hydrangeas about 3-4 years ago. But there are all kind of hydrangeas out there now. There are sun-tolerant hydrangeas, there are shade-tolerant hydrangeas. What people need to remember, hydrangeas do not really want to be in dark shade. A lot of times we think it has to be in dark shade, but there are so many different varieties out there now. So what I would advise you to do is to go to your local garden center, because the ones that they carry in our regions are the ones that do best here.
Sure.
So keep that in mind. That's very important. But they are sun tolerant, they're partial shade, and they're some that can handle a little darker shade as well.
Great. And then what is the name of the soil testing area that was mentioned at the beginning? So if you could just reiterate, where you recommend that folks local go to get their soil tested.
Yeah, sure. The one that I think is really awesome is Possum Garden Center, and that's West Ashley, and that's North Charleston, and that's Mount Pleasant. I know of those 3 locations, and as I mentioned before, they will give you the whole recipe to get you started, and it's very easy to understand.
And we'll see if we can find a link to their website, folks, and we'll drop it here in the comments later on. So make sure you come back and we'll put their website link in for you. So how long can the plant live with circular roots in the pot there?
They can live for a very long time, but here's the problem: their health will begin to decline. That's the major thing, because if we were to leave this plant in here for extremely long time, this will be all roots and no soil, because the root begin to just take the whole space of the soil and push the soil out, and as we water, it begin to come out through these holes. So once the plant becomes root bound, the plant will begin to struggle. So you just don't want that. But it can live in the container for a very long time, but not healthy. As time goes on, the health of the plant will begin to decline. So when it's time to transplant, you really want to go ahead and transplant that plant.
Okay, so one of our viewers has a 12-year-old cherry blossom that has become loose in the ground. Do you have any suggestions? Is there any hope to salvage it?
Well, here's the thing. We have to do some investigation here. Why is it loose? What happened? Something must have happened to cause that. So you need to find out what happened, and whatever that is, then we have to discontinue that, and then it's possible that you may have to brace it. It's just possible. But there's a reason why it is loose, and there may be something going on under the ground in the soil that is causing that. There's just so many ways that can be causing that. I've seen it where ground moles have tunneled around the plant, because around the root ball, because there were things like grubs inside there, so they went after the grub, and by doing that they tunnel away and push so much of the soil away, and as it rained, the plant actually began to sink into the ground. Wow. And it became unstable. I have seen that a lot, and also sometime when the ground mold go through and do that, other bugs or other critters come in that love the root system and start eating the root system away. So it could be a lot of different things going on there, but you need to do some investigation and figure out what's happening there.
All right, so check it out, find out what happened, and then bracing could potentially help you, but you got to figure out what happened first. Thank you, Digital Middleton Place. Thanks, Sabrina. We have Possum's Landscape link right there in the comments. It's already there. So awesome. If you're local to the area, you can click there and get your pH soil testing kit. Is the Middleton Garden Center open now? Sorry guys, we're not open yet. We hope to be open soon here, so please keep an eye on our website and on our social media, and we'll let you know when Middleton Place is going to reopen, but we're not open yet. So keep this broadcast in the back of your mind, because we'll be open soon, and you can come and buy these wonderful plants from us and then apply the lessons that Sid has taught us. In England, we think that we can change the color, I think you mean of hydrangeas, Rod? By adding used tea bags or copper pieces to the soil. Is that an old wives' tale?
Yeah, that does work. No, it does work. There are many different ways that you can change the pH, but that's exactly what it is. You're changing the alkalinity of the soil. And for us around this area, our pH around 6 to 6.5, so most of our hydrangeas will be blue. But if that go up to like an 8, then the hydrangea will begin to look pink. So you can manipulate that, and there are products that you can buy from garden centers now to manipulate that when you first buy your hydrangea. But sometimes what you have to remember, you can buy one color, but when you put it in your yard, based on your alkalinity, it will change. So that's very possible. This one here is Annabelle, and we planted Annabelle out in the garden several years ago, and Annabelle is still white. She's still holding on to her true color as we bought it, so I'm really happy with that. We're really just in the experimental stage with hydrangeas in order to give us some more of the late spring and early summer and midsummer color in the garden. So just really starting to experiment with the hydrangeas now.
I love hydrangeas. That's one of the, when I go out into the garden and I'm giving tours, it's one of the things I can identify more than one variety, so I feel really smart when I do that, when I give people tours. Yeah. That's great. Let's see. I've lived in my home for 4 years, and there's a hydrangea in the backyard that has never bloomed. What might be the reason for that?
Well, let's go back to the beginning. Let's have a soil pH test.
Soil pH
do
test.
That. You need to do that, because what could be happening is that you do not have all of the nutrient that plant needs to grow and to produce. Now, sometimes when a plant doesn't bloom, we just throw nitrogen out there. Well, what that does is it gives you a lot of foliage, but not a lot of bloom. It could be that you have a deficiency in phosphate. So you need to think about that. But you will not know that until you have that soil test. There's just no way of knowing that. And if you guess, you can actually do more harm than good. So I recommend that you're having that soil test done. and see what's going on there. And you can adjust it. Hydrangea roots are not very deep, so you can accomplish what needs to be done pretty quickly.
Great. All right, if there's anything else, folks, drop them in the comments now. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up. I think someone was asking, I may have missed it, do we not tickle the roots? I think you were talking about that. Yeah. So if you came in a little bit later, Sidney was talking about when you take a root ball from the container.
Yeah, so you just want to kind of loosen those up a little bit so that they will discontinue growing in a circle pattern. So they will begin to go out into the soil that you supply them with, because you want those roots to expand. You do not want them to continue to grow as if they were in the container, because that also slows down the growth of the plant. So you get this root system going out into the soil, and the plant will begin to grow as it should grow.
Great. All right, everybody. Well, I think that about does it for hands-on history here on Thursday. Some practical tips and tricks for trees and shrubs and planting in your yard. And I think Sid has given us some amazing takeaways, but I would bet that if I had you all chime in right now, what's the #1 takeaway that we all have to learn before we plant in our yard? Soil tests. Get your soil tested for pH. So that's a big one, and then everything moves from there. So thank you all so much. We really hope that you've enjoyed this. We will let you know when we are back open again so that you can come and get some of the beautiful plants that Sidney and his team have been cultivating out here. Middleton oak saplings, hydrangeas, and all sorts of other beautiful varietals. So thank you so much, Sidney. We really appreciate your time. Everybody is sending all of their thanks in the comment section. They're thanking you for the wonderful information. We really appreciate it, folks. The work continues here at Middleton Place. Sidney and his team have been hard at work caring for the property even as we've been closed. So hopefully you've been enjoying programs like this, and you'll continue to support Plugged Into History even after we've opened. So we'll definitely bring you more from the horticulture team. So thank you all so much. We appreciate you. Thanks, Sid.
All right. Be safe until next time.
Absolutely. Everybody stay safe and well. Have a great one. Bye-bye.